2022 meeting order.
One way to get through the year.
First item on the agenda is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? We've got a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
May I clarify my motion? I'd like to move to add an item to the agenda. Item 5, under new business, the election of chair and vice chair to bring us into compliance with Town of Irmo's Code of Ordinances, Section 2-293, which states the planning commission shall organize itself, electing one of its members as chairperson and one as vice chairperson, whose terms must be for 1 year.
All right, first of all, do we have a motion to approve the agenda only?
I make a motion to approve it.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to approve the agenda as written. And we have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, we have a motion now to add to the agenda elections for chairman and vice chairman of the planning commission. Do I have a second? We have a second. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries. Let us pray. Lord, we give thanks for this day as we come to make decisions for our town as it moves forward. Let us be open-minded as we make these decisions for our town and not in a selfish way. This we ask in your name. Amen. Under new business, zoning amendment request change, section 1 through 6, additional.
Sorry to interrupt, you need to go back to the minutes approval.
Pardon?
The minutes approval for last.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from May 2nd? We got a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, sorry about that. Under new business, public hearing, zoning amendment request change, section 1 through 6, addition to the official zoning map annexation. Mr. Tucker, can you approach this for us, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There we go. All right, if you will, and Mr. Dennis, if you can flip to the next slide. There we go. In our zoning ordinance, section 1-6, addition to official zoning map, annexations, the issue of changing this was for this one little section, the last section, the recommending zoning classification for the subject property shall accompany the petition of annexation and shall be brought before town council as a single ordinance, providing for both the annexation and the zoning of the subject property. The reason for the change, that is not practical, because once the first reading happens or someone submits a petition, then there's a first reading. And then after that point, then we present something to you all to move forward in terms of a zoning designation. So it's always trailing that annexation petition by a month. Well, there's no way to do this singularly as one thing. And I think in the past, council has taken it upon itself to when they annex, they assign a zoning designation, which they cannot legally do. And so that has happened past tense. So what we want to make sure, and we've said this and I prefaced this a while back, there are a number of changes we're going to be making over time to that ordinance, making some changes to some errors, some omissions, and some things that's been left out. And we've been doing that gradually, slowly, a little at a time. So what we're proposing is, instead of having that last little piece, is replacing it. The recommended zoning classification for the subject annexed property shall follow the annexation petition presented to council within 60 days. There may be extenuating circumstances where the planning commission's procedures or initial presentation, first reading, may be delayed, trailing the final annexation acceptance. And one example is we delayed Mr. Graybill's, even though you all heard it in April, it didn't go to council until May. So typically it would have been that April, but we were trying to get, I don't know what's going on here. We were trying to get the owner to go ahead and subdivide that 30 acres and break them up like he wanted to sell them first. That way when we presented the ordinance, it would have the appropriate tax map number associated with it. Because the singular tax map as it was presented, he was not getting the entire 30 acres plus the house on the property. And so we were kind of delayed that after the fact. So there are cases where that may happen same way, but we want to be in compliance with our ordinance. So that's why that change is there. That makes sense? Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
Does the owner of the property have any say or perhaps request a certain designation of the property?
Yes. So if in the annexation, we've asked the property owner to give them a zoning application to fill out. We don't charge them for it and say, what do you want? Particularly, and of course, you all look at the standard that's presented versus what they're asking for. Is it appropriate? And if you all decide on something totally different than they may want, they have that right to petition at council when it goes for first reading. Say, well, I want my property to be such and such. And council can say, well, that's not the best and highest use for it. And they can just yip and yap and protest about it. But I've never seen one that went that far. So give you a good example of that. There was a piece of property that someone wanted from FA, or I'll give you the property out here on Parkway. They wanted general commercial. If you all remember that was Great Southern Homes. And this body decided and said, we're going to make it RS, single family residential. Well, that's not what the property owner wanted on behalf or working. So even though Great Southern Home was the applicant, but the property owner signed off on it as them being the designated agent. Well, that wasn't the wishes of the property owner with the agent, which is Great Southern Homes. So what you all have the right to do, assign a different classification, then my job and Courtney's job and the town's job is to notify the property owner that planning commission, through its process and procedure, which it has the right to do, gave a different designation. Our job was to notify him, at the time it wasn't him, for him to come to council when that first reading to say, that's not what I want.
Did he come?
No, he didn't. And so the same thing with the last one, when you all turned down the Gettings group and went with FA instead of the CG for the apartments. Same thing. I then notified the property owner that this was the decision and this is why the decision was made. And to give him that right, and that was Mr. Green, the owner of the property we're talking about, Graybill, coming back, to come to council and make his petition, say, hey, I want it so-and-so. So there's provisions in the state ordinance that allows for protest, But those are the circumstances that a property owner can against, and again, what you are making to council is a recommendation. And it's council job to finalize it and to hash through all that and make a decision. But each time it's been contrary to the presented application, I do notify them in writing. And that way we have it on record. So in the event that we follow the law all the way through. Yes, ma'am.
So, when you notify, are you using like all the social media?
No, we send it to directly as a letter. So we notify the property via letter. When we have these zonings or rezoning or designation, we do send out, in addition to posting on the property, we advertise by state law, we have to advertise in the local paper, which we do. And then we actually go beyond the town's ordinance and send out letters 300 feet from all points and corners of the property to the adjacent property owners. We make them aware before, and that's how you get, a lot of time, all these people fill up because they heard about it and then they see it on the website and Facebook, et cetera.
Save yourself some money in like the neighbors app, like citizens page
Well,
app.
Rodney, basically, the law only requires him to post it in the paper, right? We don't-
Paste it in the paper and put a sign on the property.
I guess I'm saying
Yeah.
because they were all fussing, I didn't do it.
Yeah, but the thing it is, when we social media is a good thing in some cases, and it's not so good in others. When this turns a legal business of the town, we only have the right to just start, from my opinion only. I don't speak for everybody in town, so let me preface this.
You're just posting a notice that says
Right.
this meeting is coming.
Right, and we do that. We post it on Facebook, but we try in terms it relates to, when we send it to the property, we actually go through putting specifics, saying the time, the date, when it goes to council, what is being asked. So that letter is more detailed than just, here's a notice, come to a meeting. So it's more business related. So and the property owner gets that same letter. So if you all say something contrary to that, that same approach from a business perspective has to be submitted to him or her, giving them that right. But we do use social media, but I don't want to use social media for the more business aspects of it. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. But I'm just talking about advertising that there's a meeting.
Yeah, we do it. We put it on the website. We advertise a meeting. We put it on our webpage. But we anytime, again, when there are comments on Facebook, I don't answer. If you ever notice, I don't respond to anything on Facebook. And I will.
I'll quit doing that.
And so when you all got something in front of you, don't do it either. Because if it goes a separate way, someone's feel like, well, you all were slighted or tainted by Facebook followers and they don't get what they want, that be a part of their lawsuit to say, well, I didn't really get a fair shot. And there were a lot of here's so-and-so comments that someone sent to me and they passed on to the attorney. And that's one of the things when you all turned down Mr. The Gettys group, Peter Casey, remember the attorney stood up and he wanted to argue that you all couldn't do that. And of course we had legal, and I had to put together a letter, send to council also. They got a copy explaining that you all do have that authority to make changes at at planning commission level is then up to council. And that is stated in the ordinance itself, it's stated state statute, that's what your role and responsibility is. And so that attorney got that same letter, plus Mr. Peter K., plus the property owner.
What the property owner say?
No one, this didn't say anything. There was no challenge. So he had every chance to challenge. The attorney saw the letter. There was nothing from the attorney. So we try to, when we respond, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, because zoning is a legal apparatus. And so that's why we treat it as a business. Any questions on this proposed section?
All right, the recommended zoning classification for this subject annexed property shall follow the annexation petition presented to council within 60 days.
Yes, sir. That's what we're going with.
There be no extenuating circumstances where the planning commission procedural or initial presentation, first reading may be delayed, trailing the final annexation acceptance. Do I have a motion to approve? We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries.
All right, the second item is a repeal, replace. In section 12, on the administration, when it talks about planning commission roles, responsibility, well, the last one down is for code enforcement. Well, I don't know if you all know, code enforcement is done through the police department. So what this violations and penalties, portion of which is already covered on a different code section, which is section 1-8, which is general penalties. And the intent is having a process for citing persons, not for property maintenance. This deals with zoning, having a business like a building permit, making sure they're meeting the setbacks, some of the other standards that are outlined in our zoning ordinance. Some of the stuff that's in there, we don't do. We don't do ordinance summons. Those are kind of things that are not done, has not been done, that are not consistent with the current approach to code enforcement. So what we propose to do is remove this section altogether. So, yeah, that's the next one. Yeah. So what you see on the board is I already did the strike through because I didn't want to repeat this twice. It's quite lengthy. Is we're going to remove all of this. So 1.6, 12-6.1, or 0.6 would be removed altogether. And then so the 12-7, interpretation and conflict, is going to be replaced or be in that place, that 12.6 now. So we're going to take that completely out because it's redundant in a lot of ways, and it's something that's not the approach that's currently being done in terms of code enforcement. So it's it might be better in another community, but it doesn't work here. So rather all the confusion, we just took it out.
So the interpretation, the provision of this appendix shall be held to be a minimum requirements where the conditions imposed by any provision of this appendix are either more restrictive or less restrictive than any other applicable status. The more restrictive status imposing higher standards or requirements shall govern.
So yeah, that's what we're replacing 12.6 with that 12.7, just moving it up and just getting rid of that other portion.
Do I have a recommendation to delete 12.6 and add section 12.7 to the amendment for code enforcement?
So moved.
We got a second and a motion. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? None. Motion carries.
All right, item 3 is an addition. What we're doing is adding section 1-7, commencement to work. This dovetails on 2 different ordinances currently in place. First, the state statute 629-9950, which says you have to have a building permit before you commence any type of work. It also requires you have an approved zoning permit before you start any work. And also, our Code of Ordinance 8-1, building permit, says the same thing, that you have to have a building permit before you start working. What we've done is combine efforts with that to highlight having the building permit and the zoning permit approved, and outlining section that mentions CC&I, which is our partner that does issuing the building permits as well as the inspections. So we've cited that in there as well. We also have cited in that even city, county, other counties own property in the town of Irmo have to follow the same procedure, including the town itself. So if we're building something, we have to have a building permit. We too have to have a approved zoning permit. We too have to go through the whole process. We're not going to charge ourselves for the permit, but we still have to go through the same process. And it also includes school districts. Although we have no purview over the construction of school districts or different public schools, whether it's a college or university, private schools is totally different. We have purview. They have to follow our zoning standards, and they have to have a sign. So what we did was itemize that clearly in the ordinance, so as new users see that, what our process and procedure and why we do what we do. And then, as you can see below, echoing our current section 1-8 general penalties. So if you commence work without a building permit or a zoning permit, you can be fined by code enforcement, $500 per day for occurrence up to 30 days in jail.
Who's gonna follow up on whether or not I've got a building permit if I'm adding on to my house?
They just kind of drive around, and if they see construction, they go ask.
Right, so they see it, or we hear about it, we can do a stop work order. You don't stop and you're out there working, you're gonna be cited. But
When did we,
Code enforcement would follow through on that?
they're supposed to. Yes, sir.
when did we contract with CCI to do that? I thought Lexington,
No, they stopped doing lectures that's been at least over a year or more that the CC&I is now doing. And they're out of Spartanburg County in Roebuck. So Lexington is no longer doing that for us. And then if we choose someone else later on, then that portion will change. But what they typically do before they reach a building permit, if it's any kind of construction, additions, signs, the applicant has to upload to their portal, application portal, a copy of the approved signed zoning permit. The contractor who's going to be doing the work has to show proof he has a business license. And once they have all of that plus plans, then they will issue the permit to the individuals to start construction, and they do the inspections. And what we're trying to work out, because we have someone way over there and we're here, is getting notices about the COs before they happen, before they say, well, here's the certificate of occupancy. That way we can have, and we're still trying to get the logistics on that, so we can do final inspections and make sure the sign, that's the right sign we approved, that's where the landscaping is, this is how many parking spaces, nobody cut a corner before they get a CO. So, but that's the only hurdle, is you got someone way over there, and they deal with multiple communities. If it was just Irmo only, this wouldn't be, everybody got a different approach than what we have. So we had someone in-house, that'd be a lot easier to walk over and say, hey, they don't have this, they don't have that. Yes, sir.
is our code enforcement officers doing the walk-arounds, or they have people doing it?
The code enforcement, we have two. They do it. They drive around, and a lot of it's complaint driven.
Go to that website and send them something.
Yeah. So a lot of it's complaint driven. A number of times what happens, how I know, is I have access to CC&I's permit management portal. So they send me emails that somebody opened up an account for a building permit. I go through it, look at it, and say, okay, they need a business license, or they need both business and zoning permit. Don't issue anything. And a lot of times, if they have the email address, I send it directly to the person. You need X, Y, and Z if you're going to be building. And so it's been a better relationship that way. And so we have a way of doing a checks and balances in a sense, and being notified something happens. And in other cases, like today, if it's the water company, like today, someone's opened up Mingo Cookies, going to be on St. Andrews Road. They have an operation in Lexington where they actually make the cookies, but they're going to just be selling them. Well, City of Columbia sent me an email and said, hey, they need a grease trap. Who's the person who's in charge? Give me a contact number. So I fished out, found the guy, send him the contact number to Columbia, but also I sent a zoning permit, sign permit to him. Here's what we need from you in order for you to start to open. So it's that kind of relationship, and that's why we spend a portion of our time, Courtney and I, meeting with various city organizations and department heads, et cetera, from both Lexington and Richland, so we can have a relationship and they alert us to what's going on and we can do the same for them. So it's becoming more of a partnership.
We have 2 code enforcement officers now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't realize we had 2. I thought we only had 1. They need to make themselves more visible in the communities. All they gotta do is ride down my street, and I guarantee you they could fill out umpteen citations for people not cutting the grass and not keeping the yard up.
Mm-hmm.
But yet they can ride by my house last year and see a vehicle in the yard that didn't have a updated license tag on it because of the highway department and want to fine me $1,000. But I finally got that straightened out.
Okay. So that's any other questions on this particular segment of the ordinance or proposed ordinance?
Off track a little bit.
Okay, so the staff notes the action consideration to approve or disapprove the town is representing and update an official zoning map reflecting updated zoning districts.
Did y'all vote on this, Maria? Did I miss it? Y'all voted on the one we just did, right? Okay.
Streets, parcels, and boundaries, et cetera, per South Carolina Code 6-29-760, procedure for
Mr. Chairman,
interacting.
we're still on item 3, we haven't voted on it.
Oh, yeah. Let's vote on number 3.
Am I ahead of myself?
Yep.
Okay, we're talking
missed
about
it.
the construction and development activity within or approved zoning permit and our building permit and our non-compliance with zoning standards carry penalties outlined in Irmo's Code of Ordinances, Section 1-6, general penalty. Do I have a motion to approve? Got a motion to approve. Do I have a second? We got a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. I'm sorry, I was reading ahead of myself. Okay,
All right. Item 4, Mr. Dennis, if you can switch to the next slide. All right. Well, what you have in front of you is the actual updated zoning map. We've worked to represent fully, and thank you for your efforts to clean up some of the issues that we had early on. So that version there will be the one that will be officially hung in Town Hall with the mayor's signature. We're hoping, the goal is to digitize this and have it interactively on our Facebook, our website, where anyone can go in and see the zoning on the street at the address that they are at. And so that way you can, other than seeing a picture, you can zoom in and click on it and know what the zoning is for that designation. So that's the goal at this point.
so this is the official zoning map of Irmo as present.
Right. So everything is pretty much that I can see that we've looked over is in order. The zoning, the boundaries, everything has been done and cleaned up, crystal and clear. So we've gone through it several times. So you all will approve as a recommendation to go to council to make it our official zoning map. And it has, of course, a date on it. So each time we expand, change, there'll be a new map brought to you, whether it's an annexation, a rezoning. Each time from this point forward, there'll be a new map showing that you would have to approve, recommend to council. Council has to approve as the official zoning map. So we're just bringing everything in its proper place and space.
Okay, so,
As of right now today, when we get these other new annexations they come through, then, which will be after they are final, we'll get a new map. And, well, it'll be a new map after the zoning comes through. There is two potential annexations that will be presented to council, this upcoming council. And then, of course, shortly after that, July, you will have the zoning for those two, plus Mr. Graybill's rezoning request and anybody else's. And so as we get through that process, the map changes, boundaries changes, and then you all will approve it again, and then it will be again sent to council to make it official. The mayor would sign it, the clerk would sign it, and then it hangs, and we'll replace it. And then we'll replace it on the website as well.
okay. So the town's presenting an update of the official zoning map reflecting updated zoning districts, streets, parcels, boundaries, etc. per South Carolina Code 6-29-760. Procedure for enactment of an amendment of zoning regulations or map, notice and rights of landowners, time limit on challenges. The official zoning map is the visual reference to the town zoning districts and applicable standards. Do I have a motion to approve? We have a motion and we have a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Do you all want me to do the report first, and you all go into the election? Because I think you all approved to have tonight's election. Do you want to do the election after the report or before the report?
You need to do it before the report.
Right.
It says item number 5 under A, new business.
All right. So I'll come back up after you all do your.
Okay. At this time, the floor is open for motions for chair and vice chair for next year.
I'll nominate myself for chair.
Can y'all do it, can they do it again?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep,
All right,
the same, you're the vice chair, right?
Yeah.
Keep it the same.
Well, we gotta follow what we
I
gotta
know.
follow what, right. You
So
gotta
are there any more nominations other than Mr. Lindler and Bob?
Bob, your nomination was for whom?
For myself.
So there's no other nominations. We're going to go ahead and close the nomination and have a vote.
I close the nominations, call for a vote. All in favor of Bob Cox, raise your right hand. All in favor of Ed Wellington and Walter Lindler, raise your right hand.
I think you can only
I think you gotta do it separate. You gotta do it separate.
Got to do it separate.
do it
Just
separately.
you.
You,
Got to do it just you. You can't
you,
do
Walter.
with the vice yet. We got to do separate for the vice.
Okay. All in favor of Ed Wellington being vice chair, raise your right hand.
Oh, no, you're
We
up.
got to finish
We're
meeting.
doing the chair now.
You're the chair. It's two nominations, Bob and you.
Okay,
So now we got to vote on you because you were the other nominee.
okay. All in favor of myself, raise your right hand. Had a motion of 3-2 or 3-1, right?
No, 3-2. 3-2.
3-2.
2 for Cox, 4-1 for Lindler.
Okay, so I've been reelected to another term. At this time, we vote on our vice chair.
Take a nomination for vice chair.
Nominate Ed Wellington.
I second it.
Any other nominations?
Any other nominations? All in favor of Ed Wellington being vice chairman, raise your right hand. All opposed? Motion carries. At this time, I'd like to thank you folks for continuing to have confidence in me as chair of the Planning Commission. And also, I'd like to thank Ed for being my backup whenever I need him. At this point in time, we'll go forward with our staff report.
All right, going back to Mighty Wash, we still haven't heard anything from Mighty Wash. There's still an issue with the right-of-way. And I don't know if that's they put a whole lot of money in the engineering, so I don't know where that's going. We've approved the mod wash as well as the extra storage. And so we've approved those two here recently, which is now 102 for mod wash, Harbin Court. The extra storage is 108 Harbin Court. So they've been approved. We're still having some issues with Murray Landing, is the portion right outside of Publix off of Irmo Drive. So they have some issues they need to work out. We've talked with them and their attorney, trying to get the situation about an easement straightened out. The Castle Brothers, and this was one of the newer ones, and maybe it was the last one, and we were,
Storage facility?
no. They're trying to put a building on their property in the back of Broad River. Their stormwater permit expired, so they can't add any more impervious surface without having an updated stormwater permit. And because it expired, even though from a zoning perspective, from a site plan, we were fine, but we're not going to issue the approved permit without having the stormwater permit. And they are somewhat dragging their feet about doing it. We basically is not going to let them construct the second building unless they get that permit from Richland County. Years ago, after it had expired, the town was not aware that it expired, and they actually let one of the outbuildings get built the first time. And we explained to them when they saw it on the aerial, they were ready to fine Castle Brothers, but we explained that's before I got here, that was a faux pas on the town's part, but from this point forward. And that's part of our due diligence when we approve zoning permits. We look for encroachment permits, making sure all the encroachment permits, stormwater, all the applicable before we sign off on anything. And any subdivision that will come before you to approve will have the same level of standards that's associated with it. We've approved some smaller projects like sheds, swimming pools, just real simple things. We had a house that burned over in Fires Great. They did a refurbishment on that one. There's another.
Refurbishing that one on Royal Tower?
Right. And then there's one that burned.
It's coming out of that one.
They're redoing that one. So we've approved that. Now whether they got that building permit is another matter.
They got a dumpster in the front yard.
So we've done small things like that here shortly, just little things here and there, communicating about what our standard, what process and procedures are, and people are gradually trickling, giving what we need from that perspective. So we haven't done anything major from a commercial or residential point of view yet. Just to give you a heads up, that at some point in time, probably by this fall, Parkway is going to be on your agenda to approve the subdivision for that as single-family residential. So just letting you know that will show up.
How many houses is that gonna be?
We haven't seen the final. They're still working through all their due diligence on it. We just had a real short conversation when council approved adding the C provision for patio homes. You all did that a while back about adding that little C in that little spot. Well, they approved it the last council meeting, and we've reached out to them to let them know it's official. So they're behind the scenes doing some things out there on the property. But that eventually, when they're done, and we're asked them to vet it by our office first before they present it to council, that we look at it and look at some of the stuff that needs to be corrected.
Property back in there.
Yeah, we own, but we're not gonna do anything with it. That's like a crater. We could create a park.
I saw it on the, I was looking up.
So that's eventually going to come back the full amount to you at some point in time. So just letting you know that's going to be one. And council tomorrow will be discussing and talking about apartments, if you all are interested, and what's the appropriate standard for apartments tomorrow.
No standard,
6.
no apartment. Like,
Well, we have it in our ordinance, and we don't have a standard yet. So what's the appropriate density that council is willing to allow? And again, this is a growing area, the Midlands area, and housing prices for single family has gone up tremendously. So apartments is the other alternative for a professional community that is growing, that can't necessarily afford a home just yet. So apartments is the next thing.
that one over there by the gym, huh?
I don't know whatever happened to that.
That was ages ago.
Yeah, I don't know whatever happened with that, but we've gotten several calls in the past. I don't know how long about this building apartments, and so the town needs to decide what is this going to acceptable threshold. So we're going to start that discussion tomorrow night if you all are interested.
They need to have the schools involved and the police involved and like our, can our infrastructure they need people involved in the city for infrastructure that they need other people involved than just us, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, it'd be nice for you to come in and weigh in and give your 2 cents in a bowl of chili.
What is this?
The county of Lexington's zoning requirements for apartments. And apartments have to face a 4-lane road. That would have solved a lot of discussions we had here.
That do what?
It has to have a
4-lane road?
egress and egress on a 4-lane road.
We never have apartments. We don't have any, I guess it's
Like Murray.
Big Murray's.
So you're saying it's got to be a divided highway where they enter the complex, basically? Or it can't be a secondary road or nothing?
So that ends my presentation.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
It's not on this new zoning map, there's a triangle in the middle there, white triangle.
White triangle.
What is in that? It just stands out. Yeah, it just stands
That's
out.
that,
Not in the town of Irmo.
that's what's his face property, right?
What is it?
Correct.
He owned the property that,
Yeah, Mr. Jewell owns that.
there you go. There's like a.
Yeah, we got some donuts holes.
There's like a pond. He's wanting, who's wanting to make that an apartment? I'll tell you later.
Where is it? I don't even, where's it at?
He's wanting,
To access it off of Harleston Road.
his
So it's
realtor's
kinda
wanting to
hidden.
make that apartment.
Yeah, I mean, you can't even get.
Yeah, we got some donut holes.
It just stands out there. That's good.
You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
His realtor wants to make that apartment. You know what I'm talking about? It was for sale. I saw it online for sale, that property for sale, a little bit ago.
Pretty landlocked.
Crazy,
And they won't let you annex it in the city?
crazy amount of money that he wanted. They got a fence around it, you can't really, he's got like some shop, like a building on it or something.
It's weird.
It's weird shaped.
Okay.
Well, I hate to see Irmo get overloaded with apartment housing. And you folks already know my feelings about that. I'd much rather see single-family residents come in here than have all these apartments on top of one
And then
another.
we gotta think about, do we need to build new schools? Like, they're already talking about closing Crossroads, cause they're having such a hard time with, bullying and all kinds of stuff at Crossroads. Talking about closing it and making it something else. My daughter had some problems, she went there, she had some problems.
Thank you, Dr. Rodney. At this time, we have a special guest. Barb, do you have anything that you'd like to add? We appreciate your time being here with us. I'm sure you can relate to, counsel our feelings on a lot of these projects because it looks like you're the only one that really is concerned and takes your time to come to our meetings to see what we have going on. And again, I appreciate it. Anyone else want to make
Make a motion, we adjourn.
we got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? We got a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. June 6th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting is adjourned.